record on this. Hello, Mr. Tadao Ando. Happy birthday to you. You are 80 years old today. And everybody knows about you, but I'm not sure many know in detail your works. So you see, born September 13th, 1941 in Osaka, Japan. Ando had many careers, including professional boxer, local carpenter. Well, actually, I read that, on his CV, so to speak, he's describing himself as being a former professional boxer, carpenter, truck driver, and Pritzker Prize laureate. The dog is called Le Corbusier. He called it Le Corbusier. And here he says, as it happens, work was carted on where I lived, was carried on where I lived when I was 15, and I got to know some of the carpenters. About the same time, in a used bookstore, I saw a book on the complete work of Le Corbusier. I recopied some of the drawings, and I would say that is how I began to be interested in architecture. Now, in Japan, perhaps the affection and even reverence for someone might not be incongruous with calling your dog with the name of the one you love. I worked in New York for a Japanese architect who called his dog Buddha. But for me as a European, it's a little bit different somehow. I would have a hard time to call my dog Jesus. Anyway, Tadao Ando called his dog Le Corbusier. So we know by now he was born on the 13th of September 1949, self-taught architect, like other great architects, winner of many prestigious architectural awards, also a university professor, truck driver, professional boxer, and local carpenter. Not bad. Can you believe it? Yes, you better believe it. Well, Doshi, who was the first Indian architect who received the Pritzker Prize, he also didn't study architecture. He studied art for a few years, but never architecture. But he founded an architecture school. And not only he founded it, he built the buildings for that school in Ahmedabad. Anyway, beautiful are these so-called accidents, who escape the banality of, routine and predictions and so on. He's an example for what passion can do, because truly he is the son of passion, so to speak. It was passion that made him who he is. Without that passion, it doesn't matter how many diplomas you have, you'll never achieve anything. So, hello, Tadao Ando. Again, this is September 13th, self-educated with roots in Osaka. He lives in Osaka. He spent time in nearby Kyoto. What an incredible city, and Nara, studying firsthand the great monuments of traditional Japanese architecture. Between 1962 and 1969, he traveled to the United States, Europe, and Africa, learning about Western architecture, history, and technique. But isn't it strange that this text says he traveled to Africa, but he only learned about Western architecture? What about the African architecture? But this is the typical West centrism or European centrism. His studies of both traditional Japanese and modern architecture had a profound influence on his work and resulted in a unique blend of these two rich traditions. In 1968, Ando established Tadao Ando Architect and Associates in Osaka. He is an honorary fellow in the architecture in academies of 6 countries. He has been a visiting professor at Yale, Columbia, and Harvard University. And in 1997, he became professor of architecture at Tokyo University. Now, as opposed to him, the architect who gave a name to his dog, meaning Le Corbusier refused to accept a chair at the French Academy, the prestigious French Academy. But it seems Tadao Ando was very pleased to become a fellow of these architecture academies. Anyway, I respect him and I admire his way of coming to architecture, so to speak. But I, like Cordelia Lear, and I mentioned her before I started the presentation, I think a gesture of love and affection and respect shouldn't resume itself just to saying yes, yes, yes. In my opinion, there are certain aspects of his work which are a little bit, maybe just a little bit problematic, and I will mention them in my presentation later. He obviously loved books. He was craving for books because he covered the walls of his office in Osaka with books, books, and books again. He's not the only one. Richard Meyer also has his office filled with books, with towers of books. And I know something about this vice of collecting books. It is a vice. I mean, don't imagine Tadao Ando read all those books there, and he has many, 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 many more others. But the pleasure of surrounding yourself with so-called knowledge, with books, is indeed irresistible. Yeah. He has a twin brother. Actually, I attended a lecture by him at Columbia University many years ago, and he needed a translator. He didn't speak English almost at all. And he mentioned this, that he had a twin brother. And I think twins have a special psychological, state of mind. I will not speculate now on this, but it is something about twins that makes them in a way special, not just because they are twins, but also it's a complicated affair in a way. I will stop here about it. Here he is, though, and this is my claim, although he is one of the architects who appear to be more spiritual, so to speak, than many, if not most, of contemporary architects. In my opinion, he flirted and he continues to flirt, if I am to use this verb, with fashion. And it's not an accident that he's such good friends with Giorgio Armani. You see both of them here. Of course, Armani refuses to age, and he still has this boyish, almost arrogantly so, persona. But this connection, this connection between architecture and fashion is we could comment a little bit on it. I cannot forget what Oscar Wilde said, that fashion is so ugly that we have to change it every 6 months. Now, Tadao Ando seems to be concerned with eternity, with the infinite, with timelessness. So you wonder a little bit, on what plane did he meet with Giorgio Armani? Did or does Giorgio Armani also, long for timelessness? It's a question I ask. And here they are again. I like to show sometimes just the shoes or the legs of the persons I talk about, because I think there is in their posture something is being said. the Italian, meaning Giorgio Armani, is indeed, very careful to keep his body in almost perfect condition. Everything is perfect. The T-square, the T-shirt, the pants, the shoes, the watch. The stare seems to be so intense that you would say that, here we are dealing with a man truly engaged with the most severe or grave matters of the world. Tadao Ando, on the other hand, he seems to be, well, I imagine this picture was taken after he was diagnosed with cancer. At 72, meaning 8 years ago, he was diagnosed with a very severe form of cancer, and he lost some important organs. In fact, Kenneth Frampton, in a rather, well, I don't know if here is the place to be humorous, but he said, he wrote to me that Tadao Ando is the ultimate minimalist, because of the cancer, unfortunately, he lost some organs in order to survive, and he did survive. But you can see in pictures, in later pictures, that he was suffering, and he probably still is suffering. But he continues to work. This incredible will, the willfulness to fight fate, if you want, through creativity, is to be admired, if it is not a little bit ostentatious. I read that he said that, he implied that we are kind of meant to die at a certain time. So if this means a belief in predestination, which is possible, then he thought that he has to work very, very hard because yes, predestination or fate could arrest one's life or his life at any point. I don't know very well about this obstinacy, I mean, anyway. So here they are. On the left, the architect. On the right, the fashion man. Both immensely successful. Tadao Ando, From Emptiness to Infinity. This is one of the many titles that relate to his work and his life. This, I imagine, mainly to his work. Publicity is publicity could be a monster sometimes, because it distorts truth in the name of scandal. We find all kinds of inflated titles, but what is behind those titles sometimes is less clear. Anyway, this is an image of his office. As you can see, books, and books again. What you perhaps do not know is that he lives in a wooden house, not concrete house, the house of his parents. Interesting, no? I mean, this man doesn't build in wood. I mean, he did something, for a world exhibition in Sevilla, but he's the king of concrete, so to speak. But the king of concrete seems to welcome even a chair by Frank Gehry here. Yeah, he lives in a house, a wooden old house, the house of his parents. Here he is with a boxer, because he was a boxer, and I like this. I even like the way he looks like in this picture. It's boyish and unpretentious, and I don't know who well, I guess the name of the boxer is Ryota Murata. I don't know who he is. I don't know anything about boxing. Anyway, here he is with the singer, the voice of U2, Bono, and what can we say? I mean, success brought him into contact with celebrities, being Bono or Giorgio Armani. But again, I like him in this picture also because he is almost like a child. He is, you know, enjoying himself, but not in a pretentious or you know, mimicked way. Now we begin with his early works, and I'll try to show his most important buildings. Row House in Sumiyoshi. I love this house. In my opinion, his very early works, I feel tempted to say they are the best. Maybe because then he struggled the most, and he tried to, you know, to make steps in the profession he chose. I love this house in its simplicity. Is quintessential. Is paradigmatic. Is yeah, it's almost the quintessential house, and I would say it's a self-portrait. We know the plans and the sections of this house. This man who was not educated formally, he was quite capable of producing an architecture of value because of what he learned firsthand by himself, not just from Le Corbusier, but also from you know, his travels and others. I think what one can learn from Le Corbusier the most is not his lettering. For example, I worked in New York City in an office which thought that was kind of you know, connected with Le Corbusier by using his lettering. But otherwise, the buildings that office designed had nothing to do with the creativity and the non-conformism of Le Corbusier. So we are fooling ourselves if we think that if we use the modular, you know, or the you know, the font that Le Corbusier created, we are on his footsteps. We are not. So, but what I wanted to say, I imagine that Tadao Ando found in Le Corbusier a great supporter for him to follow his path and build that path through sacrifices, through fight. Le Corbusier said, for example, at one moment that you need nerves of steel in order to, you know, subsist, in order to endure even the insults coming from society, the indifference, and so on. And he was right. So I think it's more the existential path than the specifics of the architecture of Le Corbusier that Tadao Ando learned from Le Corbusier, because his architecture is actually very different from the one by Le Corbusier. You know, it's a small house, but it is impeccable. You know, it has even a poetical relationship between the inside and the outside. It's yeah, I would say it is an impeccable house. And it is a house which is not afraid of what, for some people in this world, including ourselves, seems unconventional. I mean, why should I walk through the outside in order to reach another room in my own house? Well, he was not afraid of this, so he created this bridge that connects the two rooms. Why not? I mean, this was done also by Hiroshi Hara and others, and it's done frequently in the rural context of our own country. But we forgot that because we think we are civilized, we are urban, we are emancipated, we are sophisticated. So how could we do this? Well, it seems, you know, an important architect from Japan is not afraid to do this. You see, indeed, it's a very small house, but you know, this small house is a house a lot of architects talk about, and a lot of publications were dedicated to it. You see, 3 meters, you know, 3 meters 30 centimeters wide, the house, and it's long 14 meters. So, you know, the surface area of this house is almost like a studio in a block of flats. and nothing special. Then why are we talking about it? Why is it so significant? Well, I think it is significant because, to use again the word I used before, it is impeccable. I mean, look at the entrance. When you see the elevation of the house, you would say, well, somehow there must be two doors. Well, it's just one. This, you could say, it's a mimicked symmetry, and it is true in a way. It is mimicked, but I guess it works. And so we went directly into the living room or living area, and then if you want to go to the eating place, you go through the courtyard. And if you want to go upstairs, well, the stair starts here. Of course, people could feel challenged about certain things here. The access from the dining place into the bathroom is direct. The functionalist would probably have a hard time to accept everything in this house. I understand, but Tadao Ando didn't have a problem with this. It's almost, you feel like you are entering a temple. It could have been a temple. It could have been a meditation chapel. It could have been many things. But it is a house, a little house. And in its paradigmatic simplicity, I think it is superb. So here we see that, the connection between, the two living areas is through the outside. Why not? Well, of course, there would be people who would say, wait a minute, I catch a cold, I go out and then again in, if it rains, I need an umbrella or I have to put, so what? I mean, I don't think architecture in its essence is about perfect comfort. Anyway, I like this house very much. It's in my opinion, is one of his best works, if not the best. Some of the larger projects that we are going to see later, the institutional or the public buildings that he designed, in my opinion, are less interesting than this building, most of them. Kenneth Frampton, what he said, critical regionalism is not simply regionalism in the sense of vernacular architecture. It is a progressive approach to design that seeks to mediate between the global and the local languages of architecture. Yes, I understand this. Now, yes, you could say to an extent that the work of Tadao Ando might qualify for what Kenneth Frampton means by these two words, critical regionalism, although he was not the first one to use these words, nor the only one. So here we see a rendering, a drawing by Tadao Ando. He used to make such, I would say, beautiful drawings, probably rendered with pencil. I mean, this drawing shows a clear devotion to not just to the building as built, as you can see the working drawings above, but also to the idealism of representation in architecture, where the drawing is another reality, a parallel reality, important itself. So it's not just a means towards an end, but it is in itself a creation. And this drawing at the bottom is just that. 4x4 house by Tadao Ando. This is a house, I guess, if I am to risk a little bit here, a house for him and his twin brother, because there are two identical houses. One cannot forget what I just said, I mean, earlier, that he has a twin brother. And look at them. Now, John Haydock perhaps would have called this situation a house for two brothers, or two houses for two brothers. One was a little bit modified. I imagine initially this one was like this, but it's possible that the owner or owners, felt modifying certain things. I don't think Tadao Ando modify this. It's possible that the inhabitants of the house, but it doesn't really matter. The house was not dramatically changed. Well, here it is a change, I would agree, and these two houses do connect with the house we just saw previously. The same kind of entrance. Well, there is here an asymmetry, but all in all, it's the paradigmatic Tadao Ando architecture. I like this project too by him. It's 4x4. As you can see, initially they were identical. Indeed, twin houses. The architecture of Tadao Ando shapes Naoshima Island. Yes, it's very tempting to replace ARCH with ART and then add architecture. I'm not sure this is truly the case, in his work. I wouldn't. He's an architect. I don't think he's an architect. I think he's an architect. But this work on this island is remarkable. Of course, he was affected by even deconstruction to an extent, and here we see a change architecture because the planning is not. I mean, the way he created these units and the way he placed them on the land shows, an aleatory disposition, which I don't think is his true nature, so to speak. He liked stability, even symmetry, and here we see something else, a playfulness that I think was influenced by certain ways of doing architecture at a certain time when this was built. But this shows his openness. He didn't remain stuck in his static, rigid, symmetrical way of doing architecture. He's allowing himself here an experiment, and I suspect he does like the underground. This is not the only case where he built underground, and maybe this interest in the underground is connected with I would say with the complexities of his mind, where he realizes that life and death, the below and the above, they need each other, they complement each other, and you cannot ignore this. This work by him I also like. Some people might say it's a work that because most of these things are, not all of them, as you can see here, but some of them are underground, that might show maybe maybe even a certain pessimism. I don't know. I don't know him well enough to venture in strongly stating what I just did. Here, here you can see also the presence of the old house. The museum Tadao Ando is here. The Japanese respect I imagine not only architects, but in the case of architecture, Toyo Ito also has a place where there is a so-called Toyo Ito Museum. Here is the Tadao Ando Museum. So it's something that other countries don't do, but the Japanese do. Now, the green roof of Noshina Hotel on Naoshima Island, which we just looked at, is here. And for us today, confronted with climate change and with the pollution and all kinds of things, the melting of the icebergs, the rising levels of the sea, it's comforting to see that one of our revered architects covered the roofing with so much, with this abundant green. Le Corbusier stated, stated the virtues of the terrace jardin, but he never went so far to as in this case. Anyway, but, and I think there is a but here, somehow, although the Japanese love nature and it's known by everybody, this almost obsessive use of concrete seems to me a little bit in contradiction with what we see here. Frank Lloyd Wright didn't like concrete. Frank Lloyd Wright said that concrete is a conglomerate. He used it, but not significantly, in just a few works. And he was, yes, Frank Lloyd Wright didn't like concrete. While Tadao Ando, for him, concrete is the quintessential building material, as you know. And I don't know, does he have a patent for the way he uses concrete and the way he builds? I mean, the concrete he uses is a special concrete, it's very slick almost. And the alchemists try to unite the opposites, to unite the rough with the smooth. His concrete is smooth, although in the nature of a concrete is not to be so smooth. So maybe like an alchemist, Tadao Ando tried to marry the opposites, the rawness of concrete, the roughness of concrete, with the smoothness of velvet. So his velvet-like concrete is, I don't know if it is unique, but it's certainly a signature item, so to speak, in his repertoire, if I am to use the beloved word of Patrick Schumacher, repertoire. The use of geometry is obvious in his architecture. Even his sketches are, with primary figures. But even here there is a but. He seems to like the ellipse. He likes the circle, but he also builds with the ellipse, like in this case. And the ellipse is a puzzlement for the intellect and for the placidity of the circle in a way, because it has two centers. You create an ellipse out of two circles. So should we say that the two circles which make an ellipse are actually the twin brothers? I think the connections between one's biography and one's work is often complex and subtle. Architectura, prosthetic knowledge, information that a person does not know but can access as needed using technology, but can be accessed. I don't know why I placed this. I made this presentation some time ago, and for some reason I felt tempted to add this here. This is a work that is not his. This is mimicking the work of Tadao Ando, but it's not Tadao Ando. Maybe by the way of prosthetic knowledge, and it is some kind of a prosthetic architecture here. That is, anyway. The 100-step garden of Walshi Yube Butai, I probably tortured the pronunciation. This work, to me, is a little bit problematic because for someone who loves nature, and the Japanese do love nature, this encasing of the green of nature in these obsessive squares and cubicles, to me, shows a desire from the architect to control nature in my opinion, in a rather abusive way. You know, I mean, see, look at these plants. Look at everything that is here. Is constrained. Is imprisoned in these obsessive squares. And in my opinion, here is not really someone who admires the fragility and the freedom of nature and allows it or her to be as it or she wants to be. Look at the nature. This is how nature wants to be. I don't think nature wants to be like this, but this is what man thinks that nature deserves. And I don't think it is so. I'm surprised actually that, you know, I like to think that Tadao Ando is a sensitive man, but what I see here is actually unfreeing nature of its original modus vivendi and controlling nature. And this I don't like. It might be impressive, I don't know, architecturally, aesthetically, but in essence, I don't like what I see. This abuse towards nature, you know, I don't think this means living in harmony with nature. I think this is showing control over nature. Look at this, you know, it's clearly expressed the will of the architect to control, to subdue nature. And this I don't like, Mr. Tadao Ando. I am telling you again, happy birthday to you. But this attitude that you show here, I do not like. And I see it in some other in some other works as well. Maybe not so explicitly present as here. Now, of course, there are interesting things, you know, but still, all in all, is a geometrical attempt to control through system, because it is a system of repetitive squares, what in essence is not at all accommodating something like this. Boileau said that a good work has l'esprit de finesse and l'esprit de géométrie, the spirit of geometry and the spirit of fineness. Here, I think there is more the spirit of geometry than the spirit of fineness. In other words, there is more the will of the architect than grace or gracefulness. And I think this is problematic. Modern Art Museum, Fort Worth, Texas. These are reflections in the water that is in the proximity of the museum. And the reflections show, you know, the accidental that water allows to manifest itself. And it's a fine image. But the building, again, in my opinion, shows a desire for control. Again, in my opinion, there is a little bit more will or willfulness than grace. Fortunately, there is the water that kind of compensates the rigidity of the architecture. All in all, many of his buildings, especially later buildings, seem to celebrate not so much emptiness and not so much infinity, but some kind of a willful triumph of man over, I don't know, water, flowers, plants, grass. It's complex. It's not, I'm not saying his architecture is arrogant, it's not. But all in all, it does seem to oppose to the fragility and unpredictability of nature a willfulness which might be beneficial in the short run, but I'm not sure if it is beneficial in the long run. A lot of glass. In essence, that's what he uses. He uses concrete and glass. Well, all these large surfaces of glass mean air conditioning. That's what they mean. Now, of course, the North Americans there in Texas have the money, thanks to the oil, to pay for the air conditioning. But he uses so much glass everywhere. Although he uses also large surfaces of concrete walls. It's true. But almost nothing in between. There is no negotiation between the opacity of concrete and the transparency of the glass. There is no middle term, no in-betweenness most of the time. Like here also. It's a modern building which does have a certain level of dignity, it is true. It is pleasant to an extent, but I still think it doesn't touch my heart with sufficient grace yeah, I see more willfulness, the willfulness of the architect. Somehow I see the boxer here. Anyway, fortunately, there are trees around who have a different spirit, but here was a different creator, a different author. Centro Roberto Garza, Sada in Mexico, he built in several countries. We are going to see what he built in Italy, in the United States, yes, this building I like because he allowed himself to assimilate some of the things that were being built during his time, the period when he built this work. What seems to me a little bit problematic is that this so-called gate of art or culture or design, because it's a school of design, it seems to have a certain the level of rhetorics, I think, is high. Look at this. It's a building which is supposed to symbolize the gate towards art, creativity, knowledge, and so on. But it's very monumental, and I wonder at the time when we are confronted with rising levels of the sea and the rising degrees in temperature and the melting of icebergs and all the problems. I'm not even mentioning the pandemic. Now, this was built before these things became, concerning us to the extent they do. But still, this kind of monumentalism there in an open area, I find it a little bit problematic. Again, what are we celebrating here, actually? The triumph of man? We all know that the so-called triumph of man is not a triumph in the long run. Anyway, this is the sketch he did, the gate of creation, right? Well, I don't know. Which creation? The creation of God or the creation of man? Again, I find it a little bit excessively rhetorical. It's a big building, yes, and it's interesting because it has a certain duality here too. Inside the otherwise, box-like, to an extent, exterior, you see a certain distortion and duality here. So this was built in Mexico. He built a few other things in Mexico. I like him very much in this picture. I don't know if it's possible this picture was taken after he fell ill. I like him, his posture. He seems to be modest and with a level of introversion, which I admire. But the building is not so modest as its creator seems to be. Anyway, in Mexico, there are architectural gestures that could make other countries envious. They invite architects in Guadalajara, they invite important architects to build for them. So Mexico is certainly not that country of thieves and drug addicts and so on that Mr. Trump like to describe. No, it has an old culture, and even in terms of contemporary architecture, they are very, very developed, at least in some singular, creations. We see here, and we are going to see it in some other works, this, to me, this is problematic, this parapet made of glass. I have a problem with this because I think it's I call it the hypocrisy of the parapet. The parapet is supposed to serve you when you feel shaky, so to speak, or vulnerable, to support you, to give you, yes, you need it because you don't want to fall. Well, I'm sure that glass that he uses will not break or make you fall. But then why the expression of almost not being there? It's not so obvious here, but we are going to see it in some other cases. And it's so convenient, actually. He uses it all the time, everywhere, almost indiscriminately. And its modernism, in my opinion, of the parapet is a little bit mundane and even commercial. I think he can do better. A man who looks like this, like a man who suffered and seems to be sensitive, he should know how to make better parapets. Now, I know what I'm saying now could make some people protest, but I will stand by what I think and feel, and I will show you other works later on where it's the same rather convenient way to offer protection on the side of the stair. But I like, of course, I like this thing that he did here. There are interesting things, but all in all, in my opinion, the building is massive, is triumphalist in a way. I love though this picture of the building site. Look at how organized it is. In my opinion, a good building at any stage of its being built looks interesting and convincing somehow, and this one does too. You know, it has a clarity of conception and even a certain cleanness, which I like. I don't know who this person is. Probably she's a student in design or architecture. Here he is with a lady who commissioned him. She's Mexican, you know, an affluent person, you know, a rich person, but it seems also a wise person. And I love this picture because it shows again how important it is, the collaboration between two people to begin with. It's better if there are more, but already where you have two people coming together, and you know, on the left a Mexican lady, on the right a Japanese architect, and then look at the expression of the face of Tadao Ando, and look at the expression of the beneficiary, so to speak. You know, it's beautiful when two people can collaborate and create together something. You know, so this is the building. Yes, the gate of creation. I remember the gate of hell that Auguste Rodin sculpted. And cutting the red ribbon. Of course, the Mexicans are very proud of having Tadao Ando with them. Very nice. And again, I wish Mr. Trump would have seen such pictures, because these pictures show that the Mexico, that he built that terrible wall between the United States and Mexico to defend so-called the US against the thugs and thieves of Mexico. These pictures show a very different country. You know, and I was in Mexico for a week or two, and I cannot say I know Mexico City. I only went to, you know, for a rare time in my life, I allow myself a little vacation in Acapulco. But I have to tell you, they have very interesting and intense and even cultured people. So anyway, here he is again underneath, I mean, in the vicinity of the building he built. The Casa Wabi Foundation, this is also built in Mexico. Now here, in my opinion, the way he assumed the so-called vernacular is very, you know, forgive me the word, but I would almost say is, no, I should not use that word. I don't think this is how one marries the vernacular with modernity, you know, by placing, you know, natural material on top of these cubical concrete things, you know. It's something forced here, you know. It is not an assimilated vernacular, it's mimicked, it's touristic, it's commercial. In essence, it's cheap, in my opinion. I don't think in this way he honored, you know, the so-called vernacular or local, or the local traditions or the local materials. Plus, look at this wall here. You know, when this wall is saying no to, you know, to connection, to connecting. There is something here that, in my opinion, is not very convincing at all. I like the landscape design with its fragility. I don't know if he did it or some people in his office or another landscape architect. But the buildings to me are problematic because, you know, This is concrete, and what is here belongs to something else. And the two together is not an organic unity between the two, in my opinion. But anyway, that's what he did. And this wall, strangely, was built by the architect, the Japanese architect in Japan, I mean in Mexico. But it makes me think of the wall built by Mr. Trump, or, you know, partially built. It's about separation again, and true art and true architecture is about connecting, not brutally separating. And this is brutally separating. I don't know what he's separating from. I don't know if you saw a few days ago, it was published a picture of a little bird in front of the wall Mr. Trump built between the United States and Mexico. And apparently that picture became very famous instantly because the bird seemed puzzled, you know. Now, of course, the bird can fly. The bird can ignore the height of the wall built by Mr. Trump. But in that picture, the bird seemed puzzled. And probably the bird asked itself, what are they doing here, these human beings, you know? In the same way, I'm not a bird, but I mean, I wish I was, but I'm not. I am asking myself, why did Mr. Tadao Ando build this brutal wall, you know, of his, velvet-like concrete? I don't know. Anyway, nothingness, Tadao Ando's Christian sacred space. Now, I found these words, they are not mine, but to me, there seems to be a contradiction here. Is the Christian sacred space having anything in common with nothingness? In my opinion, no. No, I think the very Christian religion would reject any association with what is called nothingness. So I don't know who wrote this, but let's look at the buildings. Based around an interview with Tadao Ando, this book explores the influence of the Buddhist concept of nothingness on Ando's Christian architecture and sheds new light on the cultural significance of the buildings of one of the world's leading contemporary architects. Specifically, this book situates Ando's churches, particularly his world-renowned Church of the Light from 1989, within the legacy of nothingness expounded by Kitaro Nishida and the father of the Kyoto Philosophical School. Linking Ando's Christian architecture with a philosophy originating in Mahayana Buddhism illuminates the relationship between the two religious systems, as well tying Ando's architecture to the influence of Nishida on post-war Japanese art and culture. I shouldn't read all of this now, but it is a provocative, in my opinion, it is a provocative issue here. Church of Light, Osaka. So let's not forget that, you know, nothingness, Tadao Ando's Christian sacred space. Now, nothingness might have something to do, but for me as a Westerner or European, I'm not sure I can understand properly what that so-called nothingness means for Buddhism. But nothingness is certainly not part of the Christian religious realm, in my opinion, or spiritual realm. Church of Light, Osaka. This is another famous work by Tadao Ando. From what I read, if I remember correctly, he didn't want to have glass here, but he wanted to have empty space. I mean, to have no separation with glass or anything. So the cross would be, would allow even rain or snow or the wind to enter through it. And in its purity, I think this idea would have been great if it was implemented. But now it has glass. But even so, the graphic power of the glass is clearly animating the interior of this famous church by him. And here it is. I like its austerity because I think the life of spirit should be rather, austere. But I think the cross, despite the fact that it is reduced, I mean, it appears to be rather so-called minimalist cross, it's still very obvious. I mean, it's not a discrete cross, far from it. In fact, I would say inside the chapel, the church, the cross is the most obvious thing. And maybe its very obviousness is actually, or obstinacy even, is actually, if I am to allow this word, a deficiency. Because in my opinion, it's a little bit oppressive. It's too obvious. Does the cross, meaning, symbolizing the presence of God, has to be so, emphatically present? It's almost crushing one, that's how I see it anyway. Otherwise, yes, concrete and glass. Church on the water. Here again we have, but here the cross is emerging from the water. I like this fact that you can open this partition here and communicate with the lake, with the water, and distant landscape and the cross. But I'm a little bit, I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, I mean, look at this cross here. Is very authoritarian somehow. I like more what he did at the top, where you see 4 crosses dancing together, so to speak. I mean, they are on the sides of a square, but they don't touch each other at the corners. I hope I have another picture where you can see that. I don't know. For me, spirituality is not, and it cannot be dogmatic. The cross is present in various ways. There are 4 stairs here, 4 stairs, not stairs, 4 crosses. Then there are other 4 crosses, the glass enclosure. Then there are 2 other crosses here. So in essence, we have 2 + 8, 10 crosses in a building which is rather small. And the crosses are not, little crosses hanging on the wall. No, they are architectural elements, quite powerfully expressed. 8 here and 2 here. Anyway, but it has yes, in its simplicity, the building is convincing, but in my opinion, a little bit authoritarian somehow. If I sit here, I am forced to look at the cross. And if the enclosure is activated, I see then 2 crosses. That is here, this one here, and this one here, a cross over a cross. And I think it's a little bit graphically too convenient. When it's more subdued, like you just see one here and in the distance, maybe it's more okay. It's not oppressive, the cross. I should never use such sacrilegious word. What do you mean oppressive, the cross? The cross should not be oppressive. But when it's too emphasized, its presence, I think it could become oppressive. Crosses over crosses. Here is a cross, and on all walls, and then inside again other 4 crosses, which fortunately I say, They don't meet at the corners. That was a great decision and a subtle decision. Otherwise, but he still controls through his, architecture. He doesn't really. I mean, he avoids possible trappings of rhetorics through the discipline he has, the rigor of his scheme. Water temple in Hyogo, Japan. Again, he descends, and I like his descending. Above the building, we have water and plants that love water. But even here, I would say there is a certain level of rhetorics. Although the man, meaning the human being, descends, his presence is clearly underlined through the strong geometry of the architectural configuration. And the symmetry, even here, you see, it's the willful descending, cutting water in two, and it still has to do with control. I have seen images in the past with his office, his employees all wearing white shirts, all dressed alike, and I understood they even exercise outdoors, outside the office, in a mandatory way at a certain time during the day. So I'm a little bit uneasy with this controlling, which seems to me to be present, not just in his architecture, but it seems also in his dealings with his office practice. I don't know, I hope I'm wrong. And actually, as I mentioned in those pictures that I showed with him in Mexico, where I see a modest man and a childlike, that side of Tadao Ando I like very much. I also like the fact, as I said, that he uses the two circles, which with their two centers generate the ellipse. This is also, I think, a good thing. But his architecture, especially in his later works, now it's possible because he's, getting older, and he's also ill, or was very ill. That somebody told me, who studied for PhD in Japan, that at that time, and this was almost 20 years ago, Tadao Ando didn't design everything in his office. He had his designers. It's possible, I don't know. Stepped garden, again, we saw this one. I should not say anymore what I already did. I don't know why I show it here twice. Now, historical museum, an interesting work, that Chikatsu Asuka Historical Museum. He designed quite a number of museums, and not only museums, of course. I didn't see too many social housing designed by him, but museums he did design. I like the steps, which you yet didn't see in this work, but you see them here. They are tectonically very convincing and aesthetically, nourishing, if I can say so. I like them because they use the material they use, they belong to the earth. In this sense, even the geometry, even if the geometry is strong, they are, earthy and raw. And I love rawness and earthiness and vitality, to use the triad that Zaha Hadid aspired towards, but didn't actually reach, because her work, as I said at other times, is not really raw. It's not really earthy. But here, because of the materials he uses, I'm also happy that he doesn't use concrete here. I love these stairs, this geometrical sea of stones. Or should I say mountain? Anyway, between the mountain and the sea is friendship, I would say. and familiarity. They belong to the same family. I don't know about this tower here, you know, whatever it is. It's blank. It's blank. It's blunt. It's concrete. It doesn't communicate really, neither with nothingness nor with the infinite, in my opinion. It's very self-centered and self-enclosed. And if Frank Lloyd Wright was right, that architecture would be very easy if you didn't have to place windows, well, I guess this was very easy to make because it doesn't have windows. In my opinion, this is not a great piece of architecture, but the stairs are. Even in the drawing, this tower is kind of a nuisance, you know, you can tell it's almost an egocentric piece of architecture. And again, I think it expresses a little bit too much willfulness. Temples. What can we say? It is a temple, but we'll see other buildings that are not temples, which are not very different essentially. Here he uses wood, but the wood that he uses, that he employs, it's very disciplined. Again, is about willfulness. Inside, there is some playfulness of an ornamental nature, like we see. And this is, I think, a good thing. But all in all, his architecture is a lot about control. And control is necessary, but it is best if it is balanced by its opposite, I would say. And it's not always the case in his architecture. I don't see here in this temple, not even in this temple, I don't truly see a man who is submissive to the gods. I would say that even this temple, and it is a temple, this is the house of some gods. I still see it as the house of man, not the house of the gods. It's a temple of man, for man, and not so much a temple for someone or something, an entity that is outside of the human. Because of this, I would say this excessive willfulness that I see at play, expressed through geometry, in a very, strong way, if I can use this word. Now we see the Japan Pavilion in Sevilla in 1991, where he used wood, the wood that I mentioned made the house of his parents, where he actually lives, possible. And again, this is to me very strange. He lives in a wooden house, but he builds mostly in concrete. The previous temple that we saw on this pavilion in Sevilla are rather, exceptions in his oeuvre. Even here, I think there is an excessive serialism, not surrealism, but from serious. I see the system. It is a system. The geometry generates a system that, again, this is my feeling, and I am subjective, and maybe I'm wrong, but my feeling is that between will or willfulness and grace or gracefulness, in the case of Tadao Ando, willfulness is a little bit stronger than gracefulness or grace. So if we are to talk in percentages, maybe we could say that will occupies in his work about 55%, closer to 60, and Grace 45 or 40, something like this. It's childish what I did, trying to approximate through percentages something which is so subtle and difficult to, impossible in fact to, but just to give you an impression of what is in my mind. I could be wrong. Even here from the outside, the building has a monumentality, although it is built with wood, that is a little bit authoritarian. It's a little bit, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable because it's so just like the tower emerging or penetrating that, large number of steps that we saw in the museum previously. This one is actually blunt and is opaque, is domineering. It dominates me, and I don't think is the case here. And I think in general, a good work should not dominate, the user or the viewer or whatever. This is my perception. Inside, yes, there is wood. Yes, there is a quest for a certain level of ornamentation or capriciousness or playfulness, but still under control of geometry, a very rigorous control of geometry. You see it even during the construction. Yeah, now we arrive at the Poly Grand Theater in Shanghai, in China. Now, please forgive me. Mr. Tadao Ando, I truly wish you from the bottom of my heart, to express myself in a banal way, happy birthday. But this building I cannot accept. I think it's a joke. I mean, I know people would throw stones at me for saying that this building by Tadao Ando is a joke. But what is this here, really? I mean, these are almost the years of the Mickey Mouse. I just don't believe it. I mean, he could have made this hole in any shape he wanted. In my opinion, this is very uninspired and joke-like. I admire, by contrast, the structure behind, which is refined and convincing, even sensitive, but this is not sensitive at all. This brutal penetration of an otherwise refined prismatic architecture is to me, is actually unbelievable. I understand he was influenced by what was going on in the world of architecture, but the time when he built it. But I'm very sorry, that's not how you achieve that balance between willfulness and gracefulness, or between control and playfulness. If he was playful here, he was not in a very inspired way at all. And again, I wish him happy birthday in a most sincere way, but this is a joke. Sorry for the strong words. I think it's a joke. It's a joke. I only hope it wasn't him who designed it, but doesn't matter. It came from his office. His name is of the author of this building. Look at this. What is this? Even this, it's so facile, so simplistic. I think he lost it in this building. He knows to do much better. Why he did this, but I understand, we all make mistakes. In my opinion, this is a big mistake, this building. Whatever is shown here, that you sit on these benches and contemplate the water, but it's really seen from the outside. Look at this. This is I'm sorry, this is Mickey Mouse architecture, and I was very surprised when I saw it. Tadao Ando, could he do something like this? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. I see the Mickey Mouse here. I'm very sorry. I mean, yes, there is some eroticism here, which is maybe too explicit. I like, though, the building behind, rectangular as it is. It's just that what is happening here is not so much in this view, but in the others is problematic. Anyway, we all lose it sometimes. We all get carried away by who knows what. Um, Also, this kind of analyzing or so-called logically explaining the morphology of your building is, to me, rather belonging to a rationalist. This the concept man. You will never see this kind of things in, let's say, in the work of Alvarado or even Luis Kahn. No, or I'm not even mentioning Carlos Scarpa, because creation is about an organicity which does not allow for these simplistic, rationalizations, in my opinion. But anyway, I continue to think this building is a failure in his large body of work. I don't know who designed this, but I admire this part of his building, which is his. So obviously, I mean, here I see sensitivity. Here I see grace. That grace, yes, it's a rectangular building, it's a box, but I see grace here, but not in those, funambulesque look at this. And this actually makes me think of his own signature, because I saw him in a video today signing books with his work for, at the publication of one of his books. And he signed with his name. And the last letter of his name, O, he circled many times. It became very, very, big and accentuated graphically. And this reminds me of a retrospective with his work I saw in New York, the Museum of Modern Art, where he exhibited a sketch, his almost usual, paradigmatic sketch, a circle, a square, a cross, and a little sketch like 25 centimeters by 25 or 30 centimeters by whatever, 30 centimeters at the most, on a huge wall. I mean, at least 10 meters long, wide. And he signed it twice on the wall, on the left bottom corner and on the right bottom corner. Now, maybe I understand if you sign a book, a book, can be, can be lost, can be stolen, or pages can be removed. Someone who wants to have a page, with a signature of Tadao Ando. But that wall certainly could not have disappeared from the Museum of Modern Art. Plus, everybody knew it was the retrospective of Tadao Ando. Why would he sign twice on a huge wall a little sketch, which was that wall was part of the exhibition? So it was clearly his. Why did he sign it twice? And I think of the builders of the Chartres Cathedral, which is an incredible building and where there is no signature at all. And indeed, how could you sign the house of God? What I'm trying to say, we shouldn't be so proud of our achievements today, because in my opinion, I mean, we should, or we could on one hand, but I think we are still divorced from a certain modesty vis-a-vis the infinite. The builders of the Chartres Cathedral didn't even cross their minds to leave their names. And it was a cathedral, not a banal little sketch with a marker. But today we sign everything. And I see that, oh, the last letter of the word Tadao here. It's his ego. I am sorry to say it, it's his ego. But you know, at the same time, I cannot forget the pictures I showed with him where he does seem to be modest and childlike, and I like that very much. But when I see this, I see the other side of him, maybe the boxer, the fighter, the one who, yes, had to struggle in order to arrive at where he arrived at. But still, I'm surprised that he did something like this, which is so brutal, you know, so obvious, so rhetorical, and so unnecessary, actually. You see here the O, you know, the O, I mean, maybe I have an issue with this O because I also noticed it in the works of Olgiati. In fact, Valerio Olgiati, if you open his website, the first thing you see is an O, letter O, from Olgiati, of course. Now, in the case of Tadao Ando, letter O is at the end, it's not at the beginning. Maybe I fantasize. I hope I fantasize, and I hope I'm wrong. But this building I like. I think even Arne Jacobsen, the great international style Danish architect, would have loved. This building, if he would have left this building without those Mickey Mouse giant interventions, it would have been a great building. Unfortunately, he didn't. Now the interior, what can we say? It's, you know, the interior, you know, most opera buildings or theaters look like this, more or less. There is some play here with some curves, it's true, but I think they are rather an expression of weakness than of strength. But I understand we are all influenced by the climate, I mean, the cultural climate or the professional climate we are part of. So, in the many books he has in his library, I'm sure he saw what other architects built, and although he was a very personal architect, and he is, but influences are unavoidable. The interior is problematic too, I would say. I mean, these heavy walls, you know, yes, they seem to allude somehow to a certain Baroque architectural art, but they are heavy. I think even in Romania, we have some Casa de Cultura, cultural houses, so to speak, with the walls not very different from what Tadao Ando did here much later. Again, the good news is this part of the building. This one, if we could make abstraction of it, would be great. Because he didn't marry successfully the monumental, the rhetorical, the heavy, the opaque, the blunt, with the discreteness of the structure behind, which I like. Anyway, a building, another building. What can we say? I wish he didn't build it, but he built it. I'm rushing now a little bit because we have other things to show, and I don't like this building, it's true. And this heavy thing here, you know, hanging on this, you know, delicate feminine structure, although it is rational, but it has grace, but this doesn't have. I said it already, I will. It doesn't matter, during the day or during the night is the same thing. He raped this prism. That's what he did with these things. This very nice prism, he raped with these, you know, huge, giant rhetorical holes in it. And it's in the drawing as well. This is his drawing. It's not someone else who did this. It's him. Too bad. Reflecting on a master architect, 10 water-centric works by Tadao Ando. Now, I don't know who wrote this title, but I don't like the word centric. because again, the word centric underlines willfulness and not gracefulness. Anything having to do with centers, with the centric, expresses an obstinacy. And I think that obstinacy should be more subtle, just like the water. The water has an intrinsic power. The water is never centric. The water flows. But yes, it's true, as Lao Tse said, water in its fragility, in its apparent weakness, erodes even the strongest rock or stone. But it's not centric. You know, this word anyway, the word does not belong to him, but someone thought of writing water-centric, but it's actually appropriate because in the work of Tadao Ando, water is also kind of controlled. It's not allowed to flow, you know, freely and capriciously the way naturally it would do. So I guess that's why I place this. There is this that you can find on the web, this article with you know, visual examples, 10 water-centric works by Tadao Ando. This is again, in my opinion, problematic, where you try to control water and place it in a centric position, but still controlled. Pulitzer Arts Foundation in St. Louis, Missouri. Well, I just said it, you know, about the water. Now, yes, you know, you have architecture, and you have the will of the architect asserting itself, and that's what we have here. Is this with part of the water centrality or centricity? Centrality would have been better, but it's centricity. This is the building. It's okay, you know, as something even of Frank Lloyd Wright a little bit. I mean, making abstraction of the fact that there are no windows. Now, museum in South Korea from 2013. Water, indeed, there is water. I don't know if it's centric, but there is indeed water. No one can deny it. But even here, you know, this, you know, stepped water garden, if I can call it so, you know, it's about the will of the architect. He's not allowing water to assert its intrinsic or native desire for freedom. No, he has to control even water. He controls it through geometry. Another museum in Shanghai. I'm sorry, but what I see here, I don't like. I mean, this is truly very commercial and banal. I don't know what is here, but this, to me, this is, I mean, if you compare with the subtlety of the first house he built, which I showed here, with this is, you know, this could have been built by any commercial architect, you know. We didn't need one of the best architects in the world to do something like this. It's very sad, in my opinion. It's so without grace, really. You know, are we entering here Hilton or something? You know, a commercial architectural firm designed this, or one of the most so-called spiritual architects of the present. Abu Dhabi, it was unbuilt. It's a project. Here we see some connections with that School of Design he built in Mexico. And we see some twistings and distortions that, you know, influence him from the architecture of the world at the time when he made this project. In essence, not very different, as I said, from that museum he built in, not museum, School of Design he built in Mexico. But even here we see the obstinacy I kept mentioning, you know, the geometry, the so-called power of the geometry, the power of the human will imposing itself even on the infinite of water, or the infinity of water. I have troubles with this, I confess. Here he is very happy that he got the Pritzker Prize, and why shouldn't he be happy? Although Friedrich Nietzsche said, celebrate your victory as a funeral. But I guess Tadao Ando, either he didn't read this thought of Nietzsche, or he did and ignored it. And I'm not trying to diminish his joy, but you know, Kenneth Frampton wrote to me, who cares about the Pritzker Prize? Well, it seems Tadao Ando did care. I mean, look at the expression on his face. I wonder if he tried to, you know, take a bite of that medal, you know, that. Anyway, architecture transformed, and now Shima's fate. The Hill of Buddha. We are approaching the end. Well, we still have three or four more works to show. This work also puzzles me, you know, because, well, he was handling, I mean, this statue existed. So it does puzzle me a little bit, because, I mean, I don't know if I'm correct, but somehow I feel the same man, the same architect, who is aware of the majesty and infinity of nature and divinity as well, but somehow I feel that he's rather not modest vis-a-vis the infinity of nature and divinity as well. The way he trapped this divinity, you know, from afar, you only see the head, the top of the head of Buddha. I mean, yes, from this level, you know, here he is, but look here. So I don't know. I mean, yes, a viable alternative would not have been to place Buddha triumphantly on top of the hill. No, out of the question. But this one also doesn't seem to me to be the best option. Entrapping Buddha there and just have the top of his head emerge from that hole. I'm not a Buddhist, and I don't even know enough about Buddha and Buddhism, but I feel, this is my feel, that Buddha deserves better. That's what I feel. Again, I feel control. I mean, look in his sketch. You know, why did he encircle and trap? Why did he trap Buddha in this way? And only, you know, his very top of his head is able to, you know, just get up a little bit behind the enclosure or above the enclosure. To me, it's a little bit, I almost feel tempted, like, you know, writing psychoanalysis of this work, because this work seems to me to say a lot about his cosmology, about his inner, about his psychology, about his role in life, his role vis-a-vis himself, vis-a-vis the world, vis-a-vis the above, the sky, and vis-a-vis, yes, the divine. Or maybe he was making a commentary on the fact that spirit today is entrapped. But I'm not sure he inferred, you know, such a criticism. I'm not, look at this, you know, this is Buddha. But if I look at old representations of Buddha in ancient temples, this would have been inconceivable. In my opinion, this is anti-spiritual almost. You know, the way the head of Buddha emerges from here just a little bit, but otherwise is entrapped, is enclosed, is entrapped, is the prisoner of this hill that Tadao Ando built around him. To me, it's not very convincing. I don't see a lot of spirituality here. I'm very sorry. Inside, yes, maybe it's kind of interesting that you see the whole, at least you see the whole of the statue, and you see a little bit of the sky and, some clouds passing by. Maybe he wanted to comment on the fact that Buddha is not yet born in the present, meaning for us, it doesn't, Buddha doesn't, it's not yet in full light, it's still kind of underground. In that sense, maybe I could accept his critical positioning, but I'm not sure that's why he did it so. Look, like when you approach the statue, you just see the legs. And I don't know, to me it's a little bit oppressive. But yes, when you see the whole of it, it's kind of okay, almost okay, but still, I think spirit needs freedom. Spirit needs to express freedom and breaking down of barriers. And this is not showing me this. Now, this museum in Venice, which I wanted to visit when I was in Venice, but I couldn't afford the entrance fee. Let's not forget his association with high fashion and with high-end enterprises. This is a museum with, well, it's an existing building where he just did some interventions at the interior, and I'm glad he left intact the structure of the old building. This was not built by him. He just did some interior design for the building, and I think he did it okay. Now it's hard to evaluate the work because we don't know, what exactly he did here. The artworks obviously are not his. I'm glad he left this wall, eroded by time and unfinished. It's good. I think it's good that he did this so. But here we see his intervention, his signature, his trademark, concrete, slick, and velvet-like concrete. Yeah, maybe here it's a little bit difficult to evaluate his work because, again, it's an existing work. But the same glass parapets that bothered me, and I find them very commercial, you can find it at any mall, really, in any mall, in Bucharest as well. Really, I think an architect of his caliber can be more creative and should be more creative and more sensitive. This is not an unimportant issue. I think it is important. And this shows, in my opinion, his problematic relationship with being mundane. There is a level of, this is the paradox, because he seems to be, and that's why people love him, because he seems to be the rebellious architect. Through his biography, he never studied in a school of architecture, but I don't know if you know, he didn't study, not because he didn't want to, but his results in high school were not sufficiently good to be accepted in a superior school. I mean, superior learning. Also, from what I read, he never worked for another office or another architect, but somewhere I read, if my memory is good, that he did attempt to write, and they didn't keep him. Anyway, something very attractive about a rebellious architect who makes a career for himself of the most brilliant kind by himself. This is beautiful. I admire and I would embrace such a person. But when I see these parapets being so mundane and predictable, and again, you can see them in any mall in this world, this makes me reticent. I'm not convinced about this. And I'm not even mentioning other things about the functionalism of those transparent parapets. Because if someone doesn't wear pants or trousers and walks up the stairs, well, you can imagine. This is the view of the building that he worked on inside. On the right, not far away, I mean, over the water is the San Giorgio Maggiore by Palladio, and with the facade by Scamozzi. It is through this door that I attempted 3 years ago to visit the building, but when they told me the fee I had to pay, I I politely turned my back on it and left. Anyway, that is not his responsibility, of course. The you know, the fee that this museum charges. But again, as I said, this parapet to me is very problematic. Yes, it is has a certain elegance, mundane elegance, because you know, but plus you can imagine the cost of this glass. You know, this glass which tries to so-called bring gracefulness to an environment otherwise dominated by you know, bluntness, by the blank concrete walls and concrete surfaces. In my opinion, this parapet is not a sincere or a subtle or sincere or both expression of that gracefulness that I thought could balance excessive geometry or the roughness of concrete, even if in his case concrete is not rough. But essentially it is rough, because even if you make it smooth like velvet, it's still concrete. Let's not have illusions that it's something else. It's not velvet, it's concrete. So anyway, this glass here used is to me is problematic. You would say, why should we make so much an issue out of this? Because it does say something. And at this level, I mean, we are talking about one of the most important architects in the world, and he deserves our admiration. But it is exactly because of that, I think, making this kind of things is problematic, as I said. Anyway, fortunately, we have the beautiful wooden structure above, which was not built by him, but is, you know, belonged to the old building as it was. And if I look at this, still the best architecture that I see here is it's in the wooden structure at the top, which was not by him. Here again, the most convincing architecture and pleasing to the eye, and so is what he didn't do. That is the top. But I'm glad he didn't hide it, or didn't change it, or didn't demolish it. I'm very happy about this. Now we see a building. We are truly approaching the end. Maybe I'll show 2 more works. A building in New York City. The only building I think he built in New York City on Elizabeth Street is an apartment building, but let's not imagine that he built for the poor or the proletarians. No, he built for those who can afford the $1 million apartment or a penthouse. Here he is. I'm sure he was suffering already. This was in 2017, so 4 years ago. He built this building in New York City, so he already had the surgery, and it must have been very difficult for him, and probably still is. Now the building, what can we say? It's I mean, this luxurious penthouse on top of the building is, in my opinion, again, rather mundane and commercial looking. And the interior, look at the interior. Now, if I show this picture to any architect in the world and ask him or her who made this, they wouldn't know, because it's so banal and so common that, you know, it's almost without an author. It's an architecture like you can see on any e-magazine or e-sign or you know, website or whatever today. You know, real estate at its very expensive site, and you know, a lot of glass, and of course no window opens. Of course, this cannot function without a huge machinery that produces air conditioning. Fortunately, I read that now, with all the crises we are confronted with, people are, even for skyscrapers, I read a few days ago, important architects who build skyscrapers, they think that the window that opens, the so-called traditional window, is having a coming back. We need ventilation. We need cross ventilation. We need to open the window. We cannot rely any longer on air conditioning. But this building, built in 2017 by Tadao Ando, at that time, I guess the issue was not pressing. But one thing is for sure: this interior, in all its splendor, would not function without pumping artificially air, warm in the winter and cold in the summer. This again doesn't show a great sensitivity towards the cardinal points or towards the elements or towards the climate. But, you know, it was 2017. But beyond this, aesthetically, I think it's very banal. Really, this interior could have been done by anyone. Yeah, you could say it's just an interior. Well, just an interior, but look at these huge pieces of glass here. You know, these are, you can imagine the cost of this, just this room. I'm not talking about, you know, other things. So again, this glass box, which is very nicely proportioned. I have a picture with this elevation, and it does have nobility and it does have dignity, but in essence, it's a glass box. Do you see any open window here? Of course not. These are not meant to be open. This is a glass wall that relies on artificially pumped air into the apartments. So it's significantly non-ecological and so on. But I don't want to be you know, an opportunist and say, well, the building has no value because it's not sustainable. Of course it is not sustainable. But I'm not judging it in terms of sustainability. Even in terms of aesthetics, it's, I mean, you know, why is this building greater than this? Really? Or even this. Plus at the top, anyway, I don't know if I have a picture with I have seen pictures and I don't have here from this side, you know, this is a huge apartment here. I mean, you can imagine, you know, this is for the kings. This is not for that Buddha with his head barely making it, you know, a few centimeters above the top of that hill that Tadao Ando surrounded the statue with. This is for human kings and queens. I mean, millions of dollars would cost this, maybe tens, maybe even hundreds. In your city, such things cost a lot. And it seems here is only one apartment because the terrace is from this level. So it's a duplex, huge. Anyway, but I like this facade, this elevation. As I said, I think this elevation has nobility. It is well proportioned, and it is sober, and yet has a level of gentleness. I like this elevation of the building. But when I think that this is one single apartment, probably, I get worried. I mean, ethically, not aesthetically. Anyway, the He Art Museum is very interesting. The He, this is the name of the family of the beneficiary, the client, H.E., who exhibits his art collection in this art museum. But I cannot forget what H.E. means in English, meaning the masculine, right? The He Art Museum. And in a way it is just that. Look at this. We are going to see after this public toilet at Tadao Ando designed, which somehow, although being much smaller than this museum, is not very different in its so-called spirit. Anyway, this is a museum, another museum built by Tadao Ando in a country which builds a lot of museums. This is done for Mr. He, or he, or I don't know how to pronounce. It's okay, but I think it's a little bit predictable. it's, this kind of architecture is flirted with even by Kengo Kuma to an extent, and others. I understand Tadao Ando is very ill, and he's getting old, and he cannot continuously invent things. So it's another building. What can we say? The same walls, the same concrete, smooth or not, the beautiful trees, yes, but otherwise, I don't think it's something exceptional about this building. The only exception is the little sculpture there, the colored one, which seems to be by Alexander Calder. Otherwise, the same parapets, transparent as he likes them to be. Then we see here some swirling stairs in concrete. I prefer this parapet by far. I confess to his glass ones, and lost sculpture there or statue. What can you say? An art museum in China. It's okay, I guess, but I don't think it's a great building, and I don't know about the art collection. Anyway, built by Tadao Ando, we move forward. We have water again. Indeed, the Chinese use a lot of water near their buildings, and that's good to them, really. I guess they can do it, and they love water, probably. Centric or eccentric, I don't know. Now, if I am to be a little bit malicious, I would say that probably Tadao Ando doesn't agree with Neufert. I mean, certainly he didn't use the formula for, establishing the right relationship between the height of the stair and the width. But who knows? I mean, in a way, I'm glad that that formula is sometimes at least disregarded, even by one of the best architects of the world. Now, you will see that public toilet that he designed. In fact, other important architects designed a public toilet in Japan, in Tokyo. So he did one too. He was invited. So he creates a circular, but circular doesn't mean based on a circle, but on two circles, because it is an ellipse. Surrounded by cherry trees. How moving, I am really moved. The cherry trees are surrounding the public toilet. And here it is. My heart goes entirely to the cherry trees. In the past, you had cherry trees surrounding a temple. Now we surround a public toilet. But I don't want to be judgmental moralistically. But I am not sure, we should bring sacrality to a public toilet. I'm not sure about this, really. And to bring even, although someone could say maybe in a justifiable way, wait a minute, you bring great architecture to anything, including to the most underprivileged spaces or functions. But, you look at this little building and you remember the museum in China, which I saw, and in spirit, if I am to use the word spirit, is the same. It's the same. It's, one is a museum, one is a toilet. One is big, it's true, the other one is small, but in essence, it's the same kind of building, like, what can I say? Yes, it's an expression of civilization, if you want, but I still like what Alvar Aalto said. Architecture belongs to culture, not to civilization. This is a very civilized toilet, it's true. Does it belong to culture? What I understand by culture, I'm not sure about that. Otherwise, of course, it's designed very well, and it even looks almost like a mysterious sign here, graphic sign. I'm almost inclined to see it to perceive it in mystical terms, but it's not a mystical place, and it's not meant to have that function at all. It's a WC, a water closet. It's a toilet. And here, now, I don't think he was responsible for this, but I cannot neglect the fact that when I see these three beings, let's say it's a family, the father, the child, and the mother. what bothers me, and it's almost, in my opinion, and I know maybe I say a foolish thing, but I have a feeling that this says a lot about much of his work. The triumphal presence here is the male. You see, is bigger than I imagine this is the mother, this is the child, and this is the father. Maybe I psychoanalyze in very superficial terms now, but what I see here is the inequality between the father and the mother, between the male and the female. The female is smaller, and I associate the female with grace, and the father is bigger, and I associate the father with will or willfulness. Now, maybe I made too much, and it's possible this was not designed by him, but by a graphic artist. Maybe it's just a coincidence. But it bothers me that the father figure, the male, is bigger than the female, because the female is connected with the child, with the baby, and the father is a little bit distant. So this says a lot about our age and our society, our time, you know. It's still man triumphal, you know, triumphalistically displaying himself, and the woman is more subdued and smaller. I look forward to a time when they are equal, if possible. And here it is, the interior. What are we to expect from a toilet? Yes, it's impeccable, right? Truly impeccable. In fact, I would be even a little bit afraid to use it. You know, it's so clean, almost. Yeah, it's the mysticism of hygiene, as Frederick Kiesler would say. Yeah, but in essence, we know very well what this temple was built for. Anyway, moving forward, it's just a public toilet. Let's not make a big deal out of it. And now we go to a different work, and this is the last work I showed today. The Bourse of Commerce, the Bourse de Commerce in Paris, which reopened after 3 years based on the designs of Tadao Ando. So he was dealing with an existing building, and he just did some interventions in and around the building. Aaron Betsky wrote violently against this work by Tadao Ando. He said that he, expressed and underlined the old French colonialism. But what I think is actually, in its essence, is a work which, I don't know if it celebrates, but it illustrates the how to say, the participation, the connection between the architect and the political and financial and fashion elite. It's it's something that I think should not be ignored in the case of maybe any architect, and in the case of Tadao Ando as well. So the historic Bourse de Commerce building in Paris is reopening. Anyway, we read this, includes a 9 meter tall cylindrical concrete wall placed within its rotunda. Located in the center of Paris, France, the 18th century stock exchange building reopened on the 22nd of May this year, I think, following a major 3-year transformation project commissioned by this person, Francois Pinault, the French businessman and founder of luxury group Kering, commissioned Ando to revamp the space to show his collection of some 5,000 artworks. And here it is. Please notice in this picture the parapet of the old building and the parapet of the new building, or the new parts of the building, by Tadao Ando. In my opinion, is a huge difference, and one day probably I will talk just about parapets. Anyway, he did what he knows how to do. You know, he brought this giant concrete cylinder inside the old building of the Bourse de Commerce. Why he did it, as Aaron Betsky wrote, probably great parties could take place inside the enclosure of this, giant concrete wall. In essence, is again, we saw a toilet and we saw a museum, and now we see a so-called cultural institution that displays 5,000 artworks collected by this financial speculator. What else was that man or is? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think this is a very relevant architecture, a very enticing, a very provoking, very illuminating architecture. It's an architecture. It's not bad. It's not, well, I don't know if it's not bad. Look at the old building and look at the new. So did he connect with the pavement here? No. Did he connect with this wall and these doors and this wood? No. Did he connect with the parapet of this old balcony, inner balcony? No. So he did what he always almost always did. He introduced this signature piece by him, and not just at the front, the ground floor, but also underneath. I don't know. I really don't know. I look at these trees. There is the river Sena probably here, or I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know exactly where it is located. The Bourse of or the Stock Exchange of Paris. But when I look at these trees, I understand that what he did is in opposition to what these trees mean or symbolize or look like. And look at these columns. They were not built by Tadao Ando. They belong to the old building. These are the columns of authority. These are the columns of the illusion that money wants to create, that where there is money, because this is the old stock exchange building, there is fairness, there is order, and there is even equality, freedom, equality, égalité, fraternité, liberté. But we know this is not the case. So the old building belonged to the power structure, belonged to the elite, to the financial elite. The architect is building for the financial elite. And what is the architect building? A fortress of concrete within which probably great parties can take place with expensive champagne and so on. But those people who tear down Bastille would certainly not be invited. And art, if we are to call it art, whatever is here, it's maybe impressive through its dimensions. Of course, this was not done by Tadao Ando. Tadao Ando just did the concrete walls and his beloved glass parapets. Otherwise, there isn't much, really. But if there is something that stirs up my eye, at least, is the pavement of the old building. Yes, here. You could say I have a distorted state of mind or psychology. Why don't I like the blank concrete wall and I like this? Well, I'm not saying that I love it, but at least it has a certain, complexity of form, of shapes, of colors, of materials. While here is just the already seen, the concrete wall, velvet-like if you want, but I don't think it's velvet-like. And what else can we say? If I take this picture and I publish it as a fragment of I don't know what expensive house of fashion by Armani or a certain more well-to-do mall in the world, people would accept it. But it's actually a fragment of a building by one of the most important architects of today, Tadao Ando. Again, on the left, the old building. On the right, the intervention by Tadao Ando. maybe I have a passeistic state of mind, but somehow I'm a little bit, just a little bit more inclined to accept what is on the left than what is on the right. But it's debatable. And as for this, what can I say? They represent the same thing that these columns represent. You know, I would say it's very commercial. You know, if this was planted in front of a Hilton hotel, I would have understood. In the United States, you would see such things in front of you know, institutional buildings or whatever, hotels, and not just in the United States, all over the world. It's a little thing, you say, and maybe Tadao Ando didn't even do it himself, although I think he was employed to also, you know, not just inside the building. I think it's about the same kind of aesthetics, the complicity between the architect and the you know, the financial elite and the power. And it's about power. It's not about grace. It's about will. And it's not about just about will. It's about the power of money, the authority of money. And his association with Giorgio Armani, I like, of course, some things done by Giorgio Armani from a distance, because you know, trousers belt by Armani cost more than 1,000 euros. So Tadao Ando is part of them, a part of this. And I understand it was always like this. Palladio also built for the rich, but somehow the distance is bothering me, you know. And if I would forget the beautiful pictures with him in Mexico, showing a childlike man, you know, modest, and even with a certain sadness, even when he was smiling because of suffering, that Tadao Ando I love. But the Tadao Ando who you know, makes glass parapets and you know, condominiums where you cannot open a window and you need incredible machineries to generate, to pump in air, otherwise you couldn't live there. And to the Tadao Ando who created this fortress of concrete inside the stock exchange building in Paris, I don't know. And here, you know, there is a certain morbidity in this theater, you know, symmetrical as it is, and with its excessive grayness, which probably Giorgio Armani would have loved, and the symmetry of those, you know, old columns kept as they are. It's a stage design that, in my opinion, doesn't say a sufficient and graceful yes to life. Thank you, but happy birthday, Tadao Ando.